All right, I just wanted to go over week one's assignment and get touch on week two a little bit. I think I will post that tomorrow, um, and then we'll go over it again next week as review because we pushed everything back a week. So week one, our topic was aperture. Aperture is referred to as the lens diaphragm opening inside of a photographic lens. So the size of the diaphragm opening in a camera lens regulates the amount of light that passes through onto the film or the sensor if you're using digital. Inside the camera, the moment when the shutter curtain in the camera opens during exposure. So basically, what I wanted to show from this or teach during this assignment is what aperture can do for you. So it's one tool that is part of your camera that helps you control how much light is or isn't getting in, so how light or dark your photo will be. It also helps you to grab a hold of your subject. If you are focused on a single subject and you want the rest of the surroundings to be blurry, it helps with that. Or if you're trying to capture a wide view scene where you want everything in focus, it can do that as well. So the assignment for this week was to read all the stuff I posted, which I will go through. Using the lens of your choice, take 3 photos of the same subject under the same light conditions, background. I also recommend setting up something so that the background isn't right up next to your subject. Put it a foot or 2 away so that you can see this relationship better. The first photo, I wanted the smallest number, which is the biggest or widest aperture f-stop, to be used. So usually around 2.8 or 3.2. Then the medium or the middle photo should be a mid aperture, so 8 to 9.0. And then the final photo should be a pretty tight f-stop, so 16 or higher. Of the same subject under similar conditions so that you can see what that setting alone does to change your photo. I think I helped everybody. If you aren't shooting with a SLR camera, this can be done on the iPhone. There's some settings that need to be changed, and there's some apps that you can download that will give you some control over your phone as well. So I did post a few photos. This first one, I was using a macro lens for this photo. I am focusing just on this center bark area. I had a very limited focus, and then the rest of it is just kind of texture and color and pattern. It's really not the greatest example, but it was an example of how you would use that to kind of create something in art. This was just a piece of wood that was sitting on our lower deck, actually, and it has sold multiple prints. People have bought a lot of merchandise products like shower curtains and coffee mugs and things with this pattern on it. So I think that's kind of funny. It was literally in my woodpile. So aperture, this is, again, it explains what I just told you. It's sort of like an eyeball. So if you think of what your eye does when you walk into a bright room versus walking into a dark room. So if you walk into a dark room, your pupil gets really big and dilated because you're trying to allow as much light in as possible. And if you walk outside, ideally it shrinks into a tiny little pinhole that barely allows any light in. And you notice that it's brighter outside, but if you've ever had your eyes dilated and and then you go outside, that's pretty unpleasant. That is it's an instant migraine for me. So the camera kind of works the same way. At the f2.0, you can see the lens is as open as it can be. It's allowing as much light in. 4.0 is kind of middle of the road, and then up here is showing f8.0 as being the widest for this camera. So again, very similar to what your pupil does. This is basically the pupil of your camera. And then this is just another graphical illustration. So at f1.4, you have a shallower depth of field, which means just your primary subject is going to be in focus and everything else is going to be blurry. This doesn't make a difference really in what you can see through your lens. You're still going to be able to look through your viewfinder and see the same expanse at 1.4 as you would at f.8 through this lens. Your field of vision is going to be the same. It's just controlling the amount of light that comes in and then how your camera focuses on everything that it can see. So it shallowed up the field. If I had a person in front of me, person would be in focus and the tree would not. But at this shallow or the wider depth of field, f.8, my photo is going to be a little bit darker and I will be able to see all these details behind her, like the bench and the tree are going to be a lot more in focus and clear. Again, another example showing an actual lens and what this looks like with the different stops, as they are referred to. And then this photo shows how you would want to apply this. So really this is, I wouldn't say that there's a right or wrong way. There's definitely things that I prefer and don't prefer. I tend to shoot at a shallower depth of field all the time. So I do kind of like this focus on the one flower and the other ones are faded off in the background. I think it's a little more visually pleasing to me. The colors are softer, less distracting. This one, you're definitely seeing more flower, but there's just all this stuff. So I would probably choose that one. If I was getting closer to this though and really filling the frame with this whole flower, I might like having some of that in the background, but again, composition. So I wanted to go through some of the comments here. I think I have it filtered onto all of them. So Brittany did this fruit tree stem, fruit blossom. So this is her widest aperture. You can see blue sky, but some of the limbs are starting to blur out, or they are blurred out. On the middle range, same thing, you can see a little bit more. And then this guy, you can see like everything. Fence, neighbor's house. So again, that's always the one I'm drawn to, I feel like, because I like all the small details. But it really, for things like backyard photography, and if you're just going around trying to take a picture of something simple, but you don't like your background, that's my go-to for making background things go away. And same thing here. You guys had a nice space. So Danielle and Henry, you guys had a nice space behind you that really helped to show this relationship. So in this bottom photo, I can see a lot more trees. They're a little distracting. These ones, though, I can, especially this one, I can see a lot of the blade of grass, where if it was a wide aperture and you were like just focused right here, some of this might be out of focus. Yeah, I like that. Good job. And then same thing here. We have a nice, really good blurry background. If you were going to print this or frame it, you could even just zoom in right there, kind of crop out that other guy. But it's just colors and softness in the background, where this, although it looks awesome and I would love to go there, you can see a lot of the tree and forest where it might be a little distracting. Let's see. Okay, so this is, I talked about the rabbit before. So what I would do if you were wanting to hide, so there's like this crease right here in the background, and I mentioned in my earlier video with my blue kind of fleecy fabric in the background, I didn't want to see my texture. My blanket was also dirty. I just wanted to see the color. So I pulled my subject about 2 to 3 feet away from my background, and that just gave me the color without any of the texture. And then Allison's. So this is, I mentioned this in my video too. I'm thinking, and maybe you stay in here, I'm trying to look really quick. I think that the aperture, or not the aperture, the ISO was set at a number instead of being on auto. And so that's why it allowed this color differentiation, which that's fine. Like I said, I usually don't have my ISO on auto, but if it was, it would have kept the exposures more the same and adjusted another, it probably would have, well, it would have adjusted ISO. So this photo would be like pretty grainy, and probably all of the exposures would be more like this. But otherwise, yeah, you were spot on for this. So this aperture was 2.8, so it had the widest lens opening, allowed the most light in, and all that stuff is just nice and soft and pretty in the background. It's actually the one that I'm probably drawn to the most. At 9.0, we can see a lot more background. It's starting to get a little harsher, a little more background detail. And then I would say this guy's, there's just more there than what we need. As far as the background goes, and it's darker than I think. You can always edit that, but I like this one. I like the soft backgrounds. It's just my style. But yeah, I think you got that relationship down as far as your understanding of it. And so if any of you want to look back through this and kind of look back through questions and answers, if any of the aperture isn't making sense to you, please let me know. And then scrolling down to our class schedule. So week 1, we did aperture. We are doing aperture and depth of field, controlling the camera settings using manual versus the AV mode. So AV, or I've actually seen them called a few different things, camera to camera, but it's aperture priority. So that means that you can set your aperture to 2.8 to 5.0 to 9.0, and your other settings, so your shutter speed and your ISO, if you have it on auto, will adjust accordingly. And aperture helps to control the background, blur, light, and composition within your photo. I wanted to do some editing and macro photography, which is the video I'm about to post kind of deals with the macro photography. And I posted a little video down below about the timing that I would use to get different things and to capture different things. It's funny, after I posted the video saying that the light was perfect midday, it started pouring and I ended up not going out for macro photos. So our assignment was the shallow versus deep depth of field photo. Going into next week, and I touched on this on the video if you're able to listen to me for that long. It's a lot of talking. Shutter speed. So shutter speed is key for controlling your image stabilization. I don't like blurry images, and when I first started taking pictures, especially of kids, it would break my heart when I would get the cutest picture, like best smile looking at the camera, but their eyes weren't in focus, or it was just a little bit blurry. And so I started trying to teach myself why that was and how to avoid it. And there are some actual rules to photography that have to be followed, or no matter what you do, your picture is going to be blurry. So one of those rules I talked about in my video about how your shutter speed denominator needs to be twice whatever your focal length of your lens is. So if my focal length today on my lens is 100 millimeter, I don't want to be shooting at a shutter speed less than 1/200th of a second. If I go down to my 16 to 35 millimeter lens, that doesn't mean that at 16 millimeters I can shoot at 1/32 of a second. That sounded weird. That would be way too slow. Actually, anything below 1/80th of a second handheld is going to be blurry and have some camera shake. So there are some rules that kind of overpower those rules, but for the most part, if you keep your shutter speed up there, use some stabilization, you're going to have a nice crisp picture. And then towards the end of next week, I'm going to show how you can use shutter speed to capture motion, and some different techniques for that. I don't always like to freeze the image exactly, especially if I'm capturing moving water or rivers, streams, that kind of thing. I really like the slow shutter speed, cotton candy water look. So that is where I would use that. And also sometimes to show movement, like if I'm photographing a wedding reception, I like to show the movement as people are dancing. So I think that's about it for today. If anybody wants to see kind of a live shooting video or do a live class time to answer questions, I think I finally did get that figured out as far as doing a Zoom meeting with anybody who's interested. Just go ahead and post any times that do or don't work for you right on the page, and we'll try to set up maybe a couple of different live classrooms where we can see what each other are doing. If you haven't posted the depth of field assignment, or if you want to do another one just to play around a little bit more, I'd like to have those in by Friday so that we can move on. That is all for today. Get out and enjoy some sunshine. Thank you.